19th, Tuesday. Call to order, roll call. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Item C, identify possible conflicts of interest. Are there any conflicts of interest? Seeing none, move on to item D, public comment period, correspondence. At this time, I'll recognize those members of the public who have indicated a desire to address the council. Upon recognition by me, persons may address the council, first stating their name and address. The council may act on emergency matters introduced by members of the public. Are there any citizen comments? Any citizens' comments? Final call for the last of the year, citizens' comments. Seeing none, move on to item E, approval of minutes, December 12th, 2023. Motion by Alderman Giles. Second by Alderman Varsho. Any discussion? Seeing none, please vote.
Mr. Werman?
Yes.
Mrs. Spiros?
Yes.
Mr. Rigel?
Yes.
Move to approve. Thank you. F, staff updates.
Yes, we have one tonight from Tom Turchi, our Public Works Director. It's a very positive announcement.
Okay, this week we're notified by the DNR that our construction for our tertiary filtration construction project for phosphorus removal was approved. We had a loan amount of $10,890,000, and we were notified that of that loan amount, we will have $3,100,000 worth of principal forgiveness, which was the second largest amount of principal forgiveness in this that was issued with the DNR this year. So the ultimate end loan on that will be $7,790,000. The overall project is planned is $14,100,000, and $3,200,000 will be taken from reserves from the wastewater treatment facility. So.
That's all that I'm aware of.
Thank you. And thank you, Tom, for that great information. Mayor's comments? I have nobody that's celebrating an anniversary, but I'd like to wish everybody, on behalf of myself, the mayor, a very Merry Christmas and the happiest of 2024 to come. Council comments. Alderman Stauber.
Thank you, Mayor. I don't know if it's appropriate. I think it is. Maybe we don't do it often enough, but I would like to honor a former resident of Marshfield, Mr. Don Yonker, who passed away on December 11th. And reading through his obituary, he has an interesting story, and I'd like to share highlights of that. Don is from Iowa. I think he might be from Iowa. So smart young man. He did graduate from high school at age 16. And Mike, you might get a kick out of this, but after high school, he and 5 of his buddies thought it'd be good to enlist in the Navy. So that's what they did. He came back, got his undergraduate degree in public accounting, and while he was going to college, worked for a florist doing the books and some other small business. In 1976, Don was recruited to work at Felker Brothers in Marshfield, Wisconsin. And I think that was a good day for Marshfield. It was a good day for Felker Brothers as well. So he held roles of CFO, president, and CEO. And while Don was in Marshfield, he was very engaged in the community. Mackey Transportation Committee, Wood County, University of Wisconsin Center, Wood County member, United Way campaign. He was a chairman of the Marshfield Utility Commission, director of Opportunity Development Center, chair of fundraiser committee for the Build a YMCA, and countless other community projects and organizations. He was awarded the Marshfield Rotary Service Above Self Award and the Paul Harris Awards. Don took his golf clubs and retired to Arizona 25 years later. But he was an influence for many of us, and me included. I was a new alderman in 1999, and I think it was retribution from former Mayor Dick Daniels for speaking against the sale of the hotel to Marshfield. But it seemed like he put me on 50 different committees, and one was the Utility Commission, and Don was heading that up at the time. And I learned a lot just being a part of that group. I felt privileged. But, you know, return on investment, holding people accountable, and a real sense of discipline. So I learned to appreciate Don, and thoughts and condolences go out to his wife, Shirley, and their two sons, Mark and Rod. So thank you, Mayor.
Thank you very much for that, Russ.
And one other thing, as long as we're at the year end, Mayor, I would like to commend you for everything you're doing for the city of Marshfield. And you're really plowing through some challenging times. I don't think the Marshfield deserves you, but thank you very much for everything you do.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. Oh, baby. Okay. Item I, City Administrator's update.
Yeah, just a few things. I'm going to start by echoing Mayor's comments about thanking everybody. It's been a good year. It's been a challenging year. We've taken on 4 new elected officials here in this body: Russ, Andrew, Brian, and Derek. And good to have their new views and input. And we faced them head on. We've got a great staff here as well. And so I guess everybody, as this probably will be the last public meeting tonight, unless there's some emergency, just want everybody to celebrate the successes and look forward to a great 2024. Thanks for all you do. Secondly, I just want to note along the lines of, as long as we're talking about elected officials, the filing still remains open for the mayor and the odd-numbered council districts. The deadline is 5 p.m. on Tuesday, January 2nd. So if you're listening at home, that's how long you have to put your name in the hat, so to speak, if you're looking at joining us. And then finally, he's here for another reason tonight, to sort of give any answers that are needed with respect to replacing him. But I just want to commend David Bueller, the year after me in 2012, I believe it was, and his accomplishments are many, serving departments across the spectrum of the city of Marshfield, along with Marshfield Utilities, in so many ways. And his work will definitely be remembered, and will be big shoes to follow as we go forward. So David, thank you for everything you've done here. And that will be the end of my comments under City Administrator's update.
Thank you, Administrator Bard. Item J, reports from commissions, boards, and committees. Seeing none, on to item K, consent agenda. Now, before we go further, we need to invite Tom Turchi up to read the Board of Public Works, because they are not in the minutes, because the meeting just happened yesterday. So take it away, Tom. Thank you.
All right, the meeting was called to order by Chairman Fire at 5:30 p.m. in the council chambers of City Hall. Present was Mike Fire, Mike O'Reilly, Russ Dauber, Brian Giles, Derek Werman, and he was on via Zoom. None absent. Also present, Director of Public Works Turchi, City Engineer Moritz, Assistant City Engineer Cassidy, Mark Kevila, Wastewater Superintendent, and the media. Public Works 2376, motion by Giles, second by Stauber, to recommend approval of the minutes of the December 4th, 2023 Board of Public Works meeting. All ayes, motion carried. Citizens' comments, none. Public Works 2374, motion by O'Reilly, second by Werman, to recommend approval of Engineering Services Task Order 23-02, Addendum Number 1 with Strand Associates for final design of phosphorus removal facilities at the wastewater treatment plant. Motion carried. Public Works 2375, motion by O'Reilly, second by Stauber, to recommend approval of the first Board of Public Works meeting in January to be held on Tuesday, January 2nd, 2024, and the second meeting to be held on Monday, January 15th, 2024. Motion carried. Recommended items for future agendas, there were none. And with no further business, a motion by Stauber and a second by O'Reilly to adjourn the meeting at 5:36 p.m.
Okay, thank you, Tom. And I see we have a comment from Alderman Fire. Your button is on. You must have pushed. Okay, forget that. Don't go behind the curtain. And now we'd like to ask Jessica to give the JL report.
The meeting of the Judiciary and Licensing Committee of Tuesday, December 19th, 2023 was called to order by Chairperson Wagner at 4:45 p.m. in the council chambers at City Hall. Present were alderpersons Ed Wagner, Brian Varsho, and Rebecca Spiros via Zoom. Also present were Police Chief Gernick, Alderperson Stauber, City Attorney Wolfgram, and City Clerk Schiffrel. There were no citizen comments. JLC 2356, motion by Varsho, second by Spiros, to approve the minutes of December 5th, 2023. That motion carried. JLC 23-57, motion by Spiro, second by Varsho to approve by unanimous consent the following. Application for secondhand jewelry license for Wickersham Jewelry LLC, 1921 North Central Avenue. Application for secondhand article dealer license from Ultracom Wireless, 911 North Central Avenue. Application for secondhand article dealer license and secondhand jewelry license from Silent Crow Antiques, 401 South Central Avenue. Application for garbage and refuse collector license from DZ Dumpsters LLC, 10848 Lincoln Avenue. That motion carried. JLC 2358, motion by Varsho, second by Spiros to disallow the claim of Carrie Nagel pursuant to Wisconsin Statutes 893.80. The reconsideration hearing of Melinda Zaleski. Ms. Zaleski requested her hearing held in open session. After the hearing, JLC 23059, motion by Spiros, second by Varsho to adjourn into closed session pursuant to Wisconsin Statute Chapter 19.85, Pran 1, Pran A, deliberating concerning a case which was subject of any judicial or quasi-judicial trial or hearing before the governmental body, specifically the Melinda Zaleski reconsideration hearing. Roll call vote, all ayes at 5:01 p.m. Present in closed session were Alderpersons Wagner, Varsho, Spiros via Zoom, City Attorney Wolfgram, and City Clerk Schifferl. JLC 23-60, motion by Varsho, second by Spiros to reconvene into open session. Roll call vote, all ayes at 5:14 p.m. Finding of facts for the Melinda Zaleski hearing. Applicant has the following convictions that due to their nature of use of substances in violation of the law substantially relate to the licensed activity. Felony possession of meth on October 20th of 2017. Felony THC second offense on March 19th of 2019. Felony possession of meth on May 3rd of 2020. Applicant failed to list all violations on application. Applicant is undergoing treatment, living at the Hannah Center, regularly checking in with sponsors and attending NA meetings. Applicant was hired by an employer. Applicant attempted to obtain all information to complete the background check. JLC 2361, motion by Varsho, second by Spiros to adopt the finding of facts as read and to grant a beverage operator license to Melinda Zaleski with 25 demerit points assessed for her drug convictions and 15 points for her failure to list all applications on the application for a total of 40 demerit points. There were no future agenda items. Being no further business, Chairperson Wagner adjourned the meeting at 5:16 p.m.
Thank you, City Clerk Jessica. We have a motion by Alderman Tompkins, a second by Alderman Giles. Any other discussion? Seeing none, please vote.
Mr. Werman?
Yes.
Mrs. Spiros?
Yes.
Mr. Reigel?
Yes.
Motion passes. Thank you. And there'll be no L because there's no action on any removed items. We're on to item M. Request to approve budget resolution number 26-2023, fire station door repair, presented by Jody Clemens, Fire Chief.
Good evening. In your packet, you'll see 3 memos regarding this budget resolution. To sum it up, a door in the station was damaged in September. We put a claim in with the insurance company. The city received a check that needs to be transferred to the vendor. The finance department and consult with the auditors believe now this needs to be considered revenue and needs to be placed into budgets outlined in the 3rd memo and taken back out to send to the vendor. I'd respectfully request that budget resolution 26-2023 be approved.
We have a motion by Alderman Fire, second by Alderman Stauber. Alderman Stauber has a question.
Just a question, Chief. I remember the grand opening for the fire department or the fire station, and I was particularly impressed with how quick those doors operate. I mean, they were like, boom, open. Was there something in the design or something that, in hindsight, that we could have done differently in the fire station door operation? Or would you mind sharing any details of how this happened and maybe how we would avoid it from happening again?
I'm sure. This particular cause, after investigation, was a combination of operator error and equipment malfunction. So some of the safety devices on it, when the operator hit the button, it didn't react. It didn't react very quickly. So it was a combination of both of those.
All right, thank you.
Any other comments, questions? Seeing none, please vote.
Mr. Werman,
Yes.
Mrs. Spiros,
Yes.
Mr. Rigel,
Yes.
All ayes. Thank you, and thank you for the report.
Thank you.
Item N, request to approve budget resolution number 27-2023, changes to 2023 budget to address various items, presented by Jennifer Solinsky, Finance Director.
Good evening. Just to kind of give the backstory of why we are here with this particular budget resolution is that at budget time, we make general fund appropriations at the major expenditure program level in the budget. And this major program level includes general government, public works, health and human services, parks and rec, conservation and development, and then other financing uses. An amendment to the budget utilizing the general fund contingency also requires a budget resolution. All the other funds besides the general fund are budgeted at the total expense level of the fund. If we go over budget in any of those major program areas, that gets disclosed as a separate footnote in our financial statements. And so to be in compliance with our budget, we have reviewed accounts and have determined there are a couple of situations where we should probably amend the budget so that we're in compliance. The first one of these relates to bad debt write-off. Our accounts receivable department has gone through and reconciled some more of our balance sheet accounts and has determined that $21,205 worth of accounts are deemed to be uncollectible at this time. They relate to delinquent personal property taxes billed prior to 2017, and then unpaid traffic signal repairs. We've done our due diligence and have placed these accounts with our collection agency. They've been reported to the taxpayer intercept program with the state. Individuals are either in bankruptcy or deceased. So that sums up why we are at an uncollectible amount. For this, I would recommend a transfer from the contingency account to the bad debt accounts in that $21,205 amount. Secondly, on the list of potential budget resolutions, and this one can be discretionary. Due to the high amount of snowfall earlier in the spring, we're over budget in certain areas as it relates to snow removal. We have only got a few days here left in December, and I don't have a crystal ball, but if we get another snow event, we'll definitely go over that public works major expenditure budget limit. So at this time, I'm recommending a transfer of $100,000 from the contingency account to that motor pool account that pays for snow removal as a precautionary measure in order to be in compliance with our budget. And then we looked at other funds where we had unanticipated revenue. So that means we've had expenditures that would exceed the amount budgeted because we spent it either, we received some grants or we received more room tax than we anticipated, and we need to then pay that out to our community member who does our promotions for Parks and Rec. And so with that, I am recommending an increase in the room tax professional services account of $105,000, and then an increase to the Parks and Recreation Capital Project account of $45,000, and that correlates directly to the amount of anticipated room tax revenue that we will realize in 2023. Secondly, I'm recommending a change of $3,000 in the Public Safety Fund for fire protection operating supplies because they received additional revenue there, and then our water main construction grants that we give through Marshfield Utilities. We actually did $299,845,000 worth of repairs. And received that amount in grant revenue. And then lastly, we collected some bid improvement district assessments that were delinquent in the past, and then we just turned those over to the bid, and that amount is $470. So with that, I would recommend approval of items listed, and Go ahead. I would recommend approval of those items listed.
We have a motion on the floor by Alderman Tompkins, second by Alderman Wagner. Alderman Werman.
Yeah, thank you. And hopefully I'm coming through clearly all right. Apologies for the raspiness. So in simplest terms, explain this to me like I'm really stupid, because I feel really stupid sometimes when I hear these. And I need to understand which of these numbers cancels out? Which of these numbers do we have money coming in, and so now we're transferring that money somewhere else? Because what I'm hearing from like some of these items is that it's precautionary, like the $100,000 transfer for our street departments is precautionary. So that means that we are not getting money in that we're essentially transferring to another area. That is $100,000 that we are allocating somewhere else without anything to back that $100,000 up. So that's question number one, is if you can kind of break that down for me so I understand it a little better. And then number two would be, when we say we're doing something precautionary like that, how much fluff are we giving ourselves? Like, what percentage-based, number-based, doesn't matter, but when we say we're transferring $100,000, that's a large sum of money. So are we saying we're transferring $100,000 knowing we're going to probably have at least $5,000, so we'll have $95 left as a buffer? Or are we saying we're going to spend $95, we might have a $5,000 buffer? Because there's a big difference.
Okay, so answer to your first question, all of the items outside of the general fund, so if we were looking at our budget resolution, there are four items. So items 2 through 4 all had a revenue source associated with them. That was unanticipated at the time of the budget. So all of those would essentially cancel each other out and don't impact the general fund. Item 1 is the $21,205. Those are real bad debt numbers that aren't going to be collected. That would be right from the contingency account, and there would be nothing to offset that. And the $100,000 from the street department, that's completely a guess at this point. I don't have a crystal ball. I don't know what the event is going to be. So that's why I preface that with at your discretion. If you believe that number to be too high, we can reduce it, or you can strike that from the budget resolution altogether. There would be no revenue coming in for that. That would be a contingency item also.
Right. If I can clarify quick, so what I'm asking on that is, I don't have any reference number to go off of to say, if we're transferring $100,000, is that one day of snow removal potentially? Or, what is that metric that we're looking at to say this is why I think $100,000 is appropriate?
It could be one event, it could be 2 events. It all is dependent on the inputs that go into whatever snow event happens and the amount of time it takes for that snow clearing process to occur.
Okay, next up is Alderman Giles and Alderman Riley, and then Alderman Spiros. Alderman Giles.
Yes, just to piggyback on what Councilmember Werman was asking, if none of that $100,000 is used on snow removal, does it go back to the contingency, or what happens to it?
It just does not get spent. It does not really impact our fund balance. So when we say we're using contingency, it's really coming out of our fund balance. So if we don't spend it, nothing happens in the fund balance.
Alderman O'Reilly.
Thank you. My question relates to the delinquent taxes. In the event that one of these properties were to sell, that whatever case they're delinquent for, is there an income that's attached to that sale to replenish property taxes, and how would that look?
As far, these are all personal property taxes, so there isn't a lot of recourse that we have in order to recoup that money. Sometimes that business has gone out of business and they just don't exist anymore. So those are all personal property related items. So that's generally what's happening. We've exhausted everything that we could do for those.
Alderman Spiros? Oh, okay. I don't see on my screen. Okay. Alderman Varsho?
Sorry, my button wasn't working. I kept hitting it. This is just to reconcile the 2023 budget, not the 24 that we just did, just for this one right here.
2023.
So the $100,000 that we put over to the motor pool, if there's no snow event the next 10 days, which it looks like there's not going to be, we won't spend it and the money will just sit there.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Can I just clarify, there was no amendment then, Mr. Varsho?
No, there was not, sorry.
Amend.
My button wasn't working here. Thank you.
Alderman Spiros?
I think you might have already answered this, but I just wanted to be sure. So the $100,000 is for anything in the future. It's not that we're already behind the 8 ball, like that they've already gone over budget. Is part of it to cover an overage?
In some cases, yeah, we're really close in some areas with that motor pool number. So at the time that I looked at this, we hadn't recorded all of our October, November records. They're not in the GL yet. So I'm not sure what would have come in November, December for snow events that have occurred that still aren't reported in the ledger when I'm looking at comparing whether we're at budget, over budget, or slightly under. That's why that 100,000 is kind of to make up what already happened in December that's not there and what might happen.
Okay, so to clarify, some of it is to cover a shortfall in their budget.
In some cases.
And we don't know that amount.
Not exactly, because there's a lag by the time the street department reports all of their time and equipment used. By the time we make the journal entry to record that as an expenditure versus the time that I prepped this budget memo.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions, comments for Jennifer? Alderman Ragu.
Okay, and forgive me for my ignorance, but if sticking with the 100,000 for the snow removal, what happens if we don't transfer it and we have a snow event?
So then we will likely go over budget in the public works major expenditure category, and then we would report that in our audited financials as going over budget, essentially breaking our budget law. Our budget is our guidance, so if we go over, we report that.
Okay, and I think I kind of know the answer to this, but I'll ask anyways. Do we know what an average snow event costs per se?
It's variable. I'm not sure if Tom has any idea. It really varies if you get 2 feet of snow or if you get 3 inches.
If you're having to
Come back later.
combine the two.
I'm sorry, I don't have those numbers right off the top of my head, but the thing is that each event is a little bit different because in October, November, the only thing I think we've done is actually put out salt. We haven't really plowed yet.
Right.
So we haven't had a full event where we've had to use the equipment in overtime or anything like that. So I don't know if I have a good answer for you right now.
Right, and I think I'm kind of echoing to what I believe what Ms. Spiros had kind of asked before too about, or maybe it was Mr. Warman, but 100,000, how do we get to that number and what does that cover? Because once again, not knowing exactly what it is, that could, 100,000 sounds like a lot, but it could be nothing compared to what it means. So that's the only reason I'm asking. And then just to confirm again, one last question here that I'm done. If we transfer it over and there is no snow event, no harm, no foul, that stays in the general fund, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Steve, and then Alderman Werman.
Just to add to what Jennifer and Tom reported, I know from talking to past street superintendents and Dan Connect, when he's here a little bit as Public Works Director, it really does depend on the amount of snow and what the event is like. How many times do they have to make passes? Do they have to come back later and clean up the downtown? Sometimes if it's a big storm, it's 2 or 3 nights later that they're still removing snow from the downtown area, from the medians and along the sidewalk. So it's hard. I mean, I realize it's frustrating to ask what it costs for a snow event and not really hear a good number, but it's pretty hard to put a number on it. It's too variable based upon how much has to be done to make the clearance over the period of time involved.
Alderman Werman.
Yeah, thanks for that, Steve. And I mean, I hate to agree to disagree on that, but I think what I think fellow council members and myself are trying to get to is that we have that historical data, and you can't account for every emergency, but I really feel like when we're going to be allocating money like this, it's great that we have, I'm more than happy to say that if we don't use that money, it's totally clear, we don't have to worry about it. I'm more concerned with the fact that if we put that money over there, and now we go over it anyways, especially considering that some of this is kind of back paying for November, December, we're running a high risk of potentially going over budget. And I'm not sure, maybe Jennifer can elaborate on what that penalty is, if there is any kind of punishment or a penalty or anything like that for that. But I think I have bigger concerns that I feel like we have the data and we're really not doing the work to say like, hey, this is a potential number. We're coming up with an estimate based on that. We can't guarantee it's going to cover everything. We can, allocate for emergencies, but I kind of feel like we're just kind of throwing a dartboard or a dart at a dartboard and just saying like, 100 sounds good. And I do have concerns with that. I'm glad to go over and say I'd rather allocate this money knowing if we go over, that's an emergency, but we've allocated planning based on what we've seen in the past versus just kind of throwing out a number. I do have some concerns with that. And again, I would vote yes for this simply because it sounds like 100,000 is going to cover us based on what we're seeing. But I think even just going forward, we have that data. We need to put in that work and say, based on what we've seen in the past, this is what we're going to do. And we can't account for emergencies. Everybody on the council should definitely understand that. I think we all know that things are going to come up that we can't plan for, but I feel like we're not doing the planning part of it. And I do see that as a little concerning.
Alderman Wagner.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I tend to agree with Alderperson Werman's thesis, and I think every public works director or every mayor or every chairman of the Board of Public Works carries around in his head a rough idea of what it costs you per hour to do snow removal. In a full-blown effort, when you've got every piece of equipment we own operating at that time, you should have an idea of what's going on there. I know I did when I was in charge of doing those kind of things. I had darn, here comes 3 inches of snow. That's going to cost me $600,000 or something like that. And I know we had like, there's a difference between what happens with a 3-inch snowstorm and a 27-inch snowstorm. But again, I'm sure we carry it around in our head. And I think we're giving authorization to transfer that money. We don't necessarily have to transfer it unless it does experience the overrun. Is that right?
Right.
So we're not definite. We're definite. It's in the general fund balance now. The only time it'll be taken out of any of it at all will be taken out of there is to balance the account of the snow removal, right?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Alderman Stauber.
Just a question regarding timing. So is our last council meeting of the year, this must be approved tonight, or can it come back with additional information?
We can't amend the budget after the close of the year that we're in. Just as an example, in this account in January, we spent $120,000 plowing snow. In February, we spent $123,000, and in March we spent $177,000. Those were our late snowfalls. The account as of today is sitting at $450,000, and we had a budget of 335, so actually 100,000 doesn't quite bring it completely in balance just in that account. That kind of gets offset with other expenditures within public works that may be under, so they kind of wash each other out. But this account in particular is now over budget.
Any other questions, comments? Alderman Stauber?
Well, I just would like to say I think the discussion and questions are good, considering the timing. Maybe in the past we might have, and I'll use the term rubber stamp this, but it's probably a bad term, right? But I'll support the motion.
Alderman O'Reilly?
Thank you. Maybe I missed it, but I think Alderman Werman had asked what the penalties would be, or could you elaborate on that at all, please?
There isn't any formal penalty. It's just an added disclosure that gets published in our footnotes. It goes, our audited financials are available to the public, and they can look at that in terms of holding us accountable to our budget. They also get sent to Moody's when they are doing our rating, so that, if we aren't under budget, it shows that we are actually monitoring our budget. It probably gets us a little bit of extra points during that rating time. So I wouldn't have brought it forward if I didn't think it was important, but ultimately that decision is up to you. And I want you to, if you don't agree, go ahead and amend this budget memo resolution as you would deem fit.
Alderman Weigel?
Could the motion be reread to me? I don't know if I actually heard what the motion actually was.
The motion is simply to approve budget resolution number 27-2023, changes to the 23 budget to address various items.
Wonderful, thank you.
Seeing other discussion, we have a motion and a second. Please vote.
Mr. Werman?
Yes.
Mrs. Spiros?
Yes.
Mr. Weigel?
Yes.
Motion carries with 1 nay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Item O, request to approve resolution number 2023-62, 2023 continuing appropriations to 2024, step 1, presented by Jennifer Solinsky, Finance Director.
Okay, so I think someone asked earlier if this was impacting the 2023 budget or the 2024 budget. This is one that impacts the 2024 budget. There are some items that after the budget process, we realized we would not have enough money to carry us through to 2024 because there were things that are in process. For example, our compensation study started late in the year. We've received one invoice on that process, but it's going to continue and wrap up in 2024. So there is a carry forward request for that. And the same goes for the recruitment of our assistant city manager / community development director. That is currently ongoing. And the third item that I would offer for continuing appropriation is software implementations within information technology we started with our major software implementation, Tyler, 3-4 years ago. There are still modules that we are currently implementing as we get through all of those. So that's money that would be set aside to do that kind of work. The next item on the list would be for public works in our claim for landfill pollution. We did a budget resolution for this item in 2023, but that is something that the testing is still ongoing, so we just need to make sure that we have the funds available in 2024 as that wraps up. And then the other item would be our post-employment health plan, and that would be for items for those individuals who are on a payout plan should they retire. There was another item on there for election supplies. Those actually did come through here in December, so we can scratch that from the list. So with that, the continuing appropriations that we would be intending to move forward into 2024 would be $312,118, and that would be the maximum amount. So if by chance we got more invoices in 2023 related to the compensation study or the recruitment or our landfill claim, then I would take those off and not actually put those monies aside in our committed fund balance to be used in 2024. And this is a two-step process. So in 2023, we give our intention, and then in 2024, I come back with a budget resolution once these numbers become a little bit more solid, and then formally ask them to be placed in the budget. So this gives our intention, and it's required as part of auditing standards in our financial report that you approve the amounts that we set aside. So with that, I would ask for your approval of Resolution 2023-62, authorizing us to make entries in the ledger to commit fund balance for 2024 expenditures.
We have a motion by Alderman Giles, second by Alderman Tompkins. Alderman Tompkins, you have a comment?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So I'm just curious, some of these items in the 2023 budget, such as the landfill claim, we sort of had an estimate for how much we thought we were going to need. Were there any other items in here that were sort of an estimate? Like some of these were pretty set. The compensation study, we knew exactly how much that was going to cost. Was there anything else that was a little bit of an estimate?
Actually, the Paget claim, the money that we set aside that we would potentially be liable for is $50,000. So we've already spent about a little over $9 million on that line item. The only thing that is truly an estimate here is the $56,000 for information technologies. We have contracts for the comp study and the recruitment, and the amounts shown there are that contract amount less what we've already paid out. And then the PEP is based on actual wages at this point in time for those individuals.
So when we put in the request for the information technology for the 2023 budget, was that the same amount that is there going to be any discrepancy between what we put in the budget and what we're going to have used and what we're carrying over?
In this case, I think we would put in the $56,000 because we aren't exactly sure how much those modules are going to be. It also covers not just our main program, Tyler Munis, but if there are upgrades to our court reporting software or our police software or software that we're utilizing elsewhere in the organization, it would come from this amount that we're setting aside.
And did we budget for that?
We budget for to an extent. So this has been a rolling carry forward for several years since that project started, and we're dwindling down. That amount has been higher in past years, but as we implement the modules, then we're bringing that down to what we think would cover us for those last few modules.
Thank you.
Mr. Turchi?
Just for clarification, the dollars are not for Paget claim. It's actually to investigate the landfill that we had that was in operation from 1922 to 1940 at the corner of 25th Vine. This is not for an actual claim. It's just for the landfill investigation that we're required to do by DNR.
Thank you. Alderman O'Reilly.
Thank you. I was just curious, would it be appropriate to amend this to eliminate the elections materials?
Yes, yeah. I have sort of a red line through it now. And so that the amount that we would be looking for is $312,118.
Alderman Wagner?
Thank you. I was really happy to see Gatsby come along because not having money carried forward and put into the general fund, it was always a problem for governments to budget with. It was always difficult. And I just wanted to, GASB stands for Government Accounting Standards Board. So that's basically who we have to please. We have to, so that our citizens know that we're handling the money in a responsible way. And I think, I'm glad to see the designation of the funds because I think some of the problems we had just in the immediate past would have gone away if we had been doing this.
Alderman Werman?
Do we have an update on the recruitment of the Assistant City Manager, Community Development Director? I know that that was one of the items we voted on moving back a start date for. So I'm just curious on that one. If we have an update, do we have a pool of candidates that are ready to go? Do we need to, is that recruitment cost? Is that ongoing recruitment costs or is it owed money?
Oh, we agreed to pay, I think, about $26,000 as part of the process to GovHR, and I think we've been billed maybe a third of that so far. So that's what she's looking to carry forward. I probably could have given an update as part of the city administrator's update earlier in the meeting. We have narrowed the field down to a handful of individuals that we are looking at now, and you can expect interviews to be coming up soon.
Okay, thank you.
Any other comments, questions? Seeing none, please vote.
Mr. Werman?
Yes.
Mrs. Spiros?
Yes.
Mr. Rigel?
Yes.
Motion passes. Thank you. Item P, request to approve resolution number 2023-63, extending life of TIF District Number 5 to capture the final increment for a proposed related to affordable housing presented by Steve Barg, City Administrator.
Thank you, Mayor. These next two items will tie closely together. This first one, and you'll see in the packet, if you look at the memo was written by Jennifer Selinsky, and she did an outstanding job of researching this, looking into it, and preparing an excellent memo. I'm merely going to highlight the key points of the memo as to what we're doing and why. Just a little background, TIF District Number 5, Mill Creek Business Park, as we often refer to it, was created back in 1997. For a number of years now, going back to 2015, we've not been able to spend any more money on that district in terms of incentives or infrastructure and collect our investment. We're really in what's called the run-out period for that district where you continue to collect enough money to pay off the remaining debt. The last date for termination of the district would be 2030, according to state law, but we're doing well and we're looking to close it out early, and we'll talk more about that in a minute. But when we do, and we expect to here soon because we've collected enough money to finish off the remaining debt payments that are ahead of us, you have the opportunity in closing it to extend the life for one extra year under state law for the purpose of affordable housing. We've talked about affordable housing a number of times in this room in the past year. So that would allow us to collect one year of increment, which is about $430,000. We'd have to spend 75% of that money on affordable housing, and then the other 25% could be spent on something else related to the topic of housing in general. We would need to do a final resolution in the spring by April 15th as part of this. We'd also have to develop a plan on how those monies are going to be spent. You can't just say, well, we're going to use it for affordable housing. You've got to have some defined uses to try and show how you'll be making best use of the funds. So as we start down that road, that'll be a big project for the first quarter of 2024. But the recommendation for tonight is to approve resolution 2023-63 and to move forward with stating that we intend to collect 1 year of TIF increment, extending the life of that TIF District 5 for another year for affordable housing purposes.
We have a motion by Alderman Wagner, second by Alderman Varsho. Any other discussion? Seeing none, please vote.
Mr. Werman?
Yes.
Mrs. Spiros?
No.
Mr. Rigel?
Yes.
Motion passes. Item Q, request to approve agreement with Cedar Corporation for professional services related to the creation of TIF District Number 15, presented by Steve Barg, City Administrator.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, right on the heels of that last one, we've got a proposal to create TIF District 15. And again, the reason it's needed is just what I stated a minute ago, that with the expenditure period running out or done now in TIF District 5, and now officially closing the district, we've got a large portion of the Mill Creek Business Park without any incentive opportunities to offer for companies that may wish to locate here or expand here. And you know, we've had some very successful businesses out there. Jennifer had indicated in her memo, Prevention Genetics, Hewitt Meats, Top Form, and Dental Crafters, to name a few. So we want to be able to have incentives available to try and attract and keep good businesses in the business park. So as part of that, we're looking to create a new TIF district, and it would cover the remaining, presumably, we don't have the drawing here in front of us right now tonight, but presumably would cover all of the parcels that are undeveloped at this time and give us that opportunity. Our intent is to work with the council to accomplish this during the first quarter of 2024. And you know, in doing so, this will allow us to be able to move forward with our goal of filling up that park in a way that otherwise would probably not happen. The city has used different consultants over the years in terms of helping us to create TIF districts. One of them is Ellers. I think we've used recently. We've used MSA Professional Services in town. In this case, with Josh Miller from Cedar Corp involved in our Mill Creek Business Park over the past year as a consultant, and working with Weinbrenner, who's a company very seriously looking at constructing in the business park, it would seem appropriate for us to use Cedar Corporation for this particular job. Their proposal is in line with what we expect in most TIF districts as far as the price tag. And the contract has been reviewed by the city attorney and city staff. I did put a new copy of the contract on your desks tonight, and I sent it to you earlier today by email. The city attorney alertly caught one thing. You probably remember that in recent contracts with our vendors, consultants, and contractors, we've been making sure to insert a public records paragraph that makes it painfully clear that the contractor, vendor, consultant is responsible to maintain and share with us upon request public records that might tie to open records requests and other needs that we have to fulfill our state obligations. So with that all in mind, I would recommend council approval of the contract with Cedar Corporation for services related to creating a new TIF district, TIF District 15.
So a motion by Alderman Starbus, second by Alderman Marshall. Alderman Tompkins.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm just wondering, when you have a district that will close, are there rules about then creating another one on the same land? Is there a timing rule or?
Not really. In fact, we've talked about in the area of the West 2nd Street corridor that we could actually create one over much of what is the current TIF District 4 that has also run out its time in terms of expenditure. That all comes down to what, you know, when you have new increment created, how you deal with that. But in this case, I don't think we're talking, although we haven't started working to create TIF District 15 yet, we may well just be talking about having it be configured so that it only encompasses the remaining undeveloped parcels, which would totally eliminate that concern entirely.
Alderman O'Reilly.
Just a clarification. So it would only cover undeveloped stuff. It could not be used on anything that's already got development on the areas?
I suspect that will be our proposal. It wouldn't be unlawful for us to overlap developed parcels, but I think our proposal, our intent is to have the undeveloped parcels have incentives that we can bring people to town and get them to build here.
Any other comments, questions? Seeing none, please vote.
Mr. Werman?
Yes.
Mrs. Spiros?
Yes.
Mr. Rigel?
Yes.
Motion carries. Thank you. Item R, request to approve extension of contract for economic development services with Cedar Corp through March 31st, 2024, presented by Steve Bark, City Administrator.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, we talked a minute ago about the hiring process for the new Assistant City Administrator / Community Development Director, and getting that person on board will be the kickoff, hopefully, to getting economic development and planning staff in place with the city planner and perhaps others. But right now, we continue to work without staff members in the field of economic development and planning. We've been blessed, as we've talked about before, to have Bryce Hembrook from SCH and Josh Miller from Cedar Corp to help us out. And the request tonight is to consider extending the contract with Cedar Corporation for another 3-month period from January 1st to March 31st of 2024. at the same rate of $130 an hour for his services. It's on a time and materials basis. The only change to the contract that's of any note at all is right now, the contract talks about Josh being responsible for preparation of agendas and materials and whatnot related to the Economic Development Board. I've generally done that more times than not. Also, it talks about his attendance at those meetings. And I'd like to have it be where he comes to those meetings on an as-needed basis. We pay for 10 hours of his time per month. And, for him to come here and spend a couple hours, unless there's anything on the agenda that really demands his time and makes it worthy of his time, we feel maybe there's a better use for those very limited hours that we have him for. So that's the premise behind changing the contract in that way. And just to note, if, for example, we would decide in after a couple of months of 2024 that we want to veer away, maybe we decide we don't need the contract to go on, we're not paying for sure for this person through the end of 2024 March. I mean, all we're saying is we have the right at this pay rate to continue using their services through the end of March. If we had somebody on board earlier, which is very unlikely, to do economic development, we could cease the contract, if you will, at that point. So with all that in mind, staff would recommend approval of the extension covering the first quarter of 2024 for Cedar Corporation for the services of Mr. Miller.
We have a motion on the floor by Alderman Stauber, second by Alderman Giles. Alderman Stauber?
So my motion is not to support the recommendation. And I say that because last year we spent $72,400 roughly for Cedar Corp. And we have a policy on file 4.810, engagement of professional services, July of 23. And it requires us to go out for bid for anything over $25,000. So we don't have any guarantees that we'll have an economic development person in place by March 31st, but I just don't feel comfortable continuing to extend knowing that we spent that much money in 2023 for professional services, kind of skirting around the policy.
So what exactly is your motion? Could you clarify, please?
Go out for bid.
Okay, go ahead. First of all, let me just address the amount of money we paid to Cedar Corp so far in 2023. That is the total amount we paid the corporation. Probably close to half of that was paid related to the certified site process, where we worked with Via Rail as well and Cedar Corp to get the status that we're hopefully going to get from WEDC in terms of being considered shovel ready by the state and being looked at that way by developers and site selectors. So that wasn't even part of, that's not part of the monthly contract. We normally pay, a much lesser amount for his weekly services, if you will. Thinking back to how we got Cedar Corp, I guess I'd have to look at the minutes. I know we brought it forward as a proposal. I think you're right. I don't think we had any competitive bids for it, but we also brought it forward the same way we're bringing it to you now as a time and materials agreement, based upon so much per hour for someone's services. And I guess I'd have to look closer at the procurement policy to see if that's treated or has been treated the same way as other kinds of block contracts. I'm not disputing it with you. I'm just raising that point that if we were saying we're going to spend $40,000 on company AYZ, that would be different than we're going to pay, buying time and materials for some period of time. But again, we can talk about that.
And anticipating some discussion, I gave a copy of the policy to legal in advance, and I don't know if we want to talk about it now, but.
I would first like to ask Brian Giles, are you in agreement with Alderman Stauber?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we'll have our city attorney and then Alderman Wagner, then Alderman Tompkins, and then Alderman Werman.
Alderman Stauber did provide me a copy of the policy. It's a standard policy, which does indicate that in any particular project or on an ongoing series of projects where there would be an expense of $25,000 or more annually, that it would be sent out for an RFP. So it's not specifically a bid. I want to make that clear because it's really these are still services, so you don't necessarily go with the lowest bid, but the policy is in place to do an RFP for those services.
So how about the issue of the fact, and I don't want to try and parse this out too far, but each one of these quarters, these 3-month periods that we've re-upped with Cedar, it's been at the idea of spending about $5,000 a month, and that's pretty much what the monthly bills have come to. I think I approved one today for just a little bit more than that, but is it considered, based upon the fact we've now done this for several quarters, is that collectively considered to be
Your
crossing that line?
your policy isn't clear in regard to that. It's looking at it on an annual basis. So as you chunk that together, that's the question.
Okay.
And I suppose if you take this right now and say, well, we're looking at going forward to March, is it more than $25,000 contemplated in that time period?
It won't be.
Then in theory, then you've implicated this policy. If not, it's sort of at the discretion of the body. So that the point is taken that there's policy in place, but the question is, do you have to put it out for RFPs? And frankly, I think that's a discretionary decision to be made by the body and appropriate for the motion that was made.
And please understand, I'm not trying to be argumentative. I'm just trying to figure out how we got here and what the policy means. So,
Alderman Wagner?
Thank you. I want to once again express my frustration with the length of time that's been taking to replace these personnel. And we decided, and it seemed to make sense at the time, but now I regret it woefully. And what I regret is that we said that we wouldn't fill any of the subordinate positions. We wouldn't, I said we wouldn't look at those subordinate positions until we had the department head hired, and then let that department head hire his or her own persons to work with them under the development of corporation. The reason I regret it is I didn't know that meant we weren't even going to advertise. We weren't going to find anything. It's just, this is just taking way too long, folks. I mean, we have to be able to do two things at one time, walk and chew bubble gum and maybe add a third thing and just hire some staff. I mean, this has got to, something's got to give here. We got to move a little further. And when I saw this thing come up, I thought, well, here we go again. Here's another $15,000, $25,000 that's going to be spent on a consultant. And we still won't have, at the end of it all, we still won't have a development department in place. I'm going to go along with Alderman Stauber only because I want to see some movement in this direction. And the sooner, the better. We hear, as aldermen, we hear things like, oh, we've put so much stress on the city administrator because he's got to do everybody else's job now, and especially the jobs for the development corporation. That should never be. That should never be. I'm going to support this. Thank you.
Alderman Tompkins?
I just have a few questions. If this goes out to RFP, right? If it goes out for that, how much time would that take from start to finish?
Well, we've used the phrase RFP. I assume what we'd probably be doing is RFQ. We'd be getting, as far as price, we'd be getting an hourly rate. So maybe that does, I'm not sure if that's what you think of as an RFP, but we'd be looking to find out how many, competitive people would be interested. To your question, probably from start to finish, probably 60 days or something. I don't know.
So would there be a plan in place if it was 30 to 60 days? Would there be a plan in place for us to still have consultants helping us with development while we're waiting for that?
I think it's all up to this body at this point. I mean, whatever your purview is, so to speak.
Alderman Worman, then Alderman Weigel.
So I'm going to ask the tough question here, and that is this a need? Do we absolutely need this right now? Because the update we just got on the position sounds like we have some very promising candidates, and we're in such a tough budgetary spot that we decided to push off that start date for a month and a half. So from January until February, I believe 15th is what we decided. So I would ask, is this an absolute need? I know that it says in here that we could end the contract early, pending any additional staff onboarded. But we're talking about a month and a half that we couldn't afford to pay for that person to be employed. So can we afford to spend this money, or should we eat that for that month and a half until we get somebody, the right candidate, in place and employed?
Alderman Weigel and Alderman Spiros.
Was there going to be an answer to Mr. Warman's question, or am I just going on?
At the end of.
I'd be glad if you'd like to hear it. I mean, I just wasn't sure there's other people with their hands up, but I can jump in if it's okay, Mayor.
Absolutely.
You know, I'm going to speak for myself at this point because it's hard not to. You know, right now we have 10 hours roughly a week from Josh Miller as our economic development consultant. And I know that there's a desire, I hear Council President Wagner loud and clear, to have staff, full-time staff here. But as we go along day to day, week to week, the help I get from Josh is valuable. But truthfully, what I'm doing right now in the area of dealing with Weinbrenner, Vanderwall, TIF District 13, TIF District 14, and I could go on, that are all economic development related, is extensive. And if that's pulled away from me on January 1st, I'm not sure what I do next. I'm really not. And I don't normally talk, I can't remember the last time I talked this way in a public meeting, but I'd be struggling.
And Andy, do you mind if I follow up on that quick?
No, go right ahead.
So, Steve, can you do me a favor and like put an hour to that, put a number of hours to that? Because I think that, and I'm not trying to say that you don't need the help. I'm just trying to get to the point of, I feel like we're making a lot of decisions as a council that are having a lot of downstream effects, and we're either not thinking those through or we're finding out the facts too late. So in this case, we're talking about $1,300, 10 hours with Cedar Corp, $130 an hour. So $1,300, but that doesn't account for the proposed time, the hidden time that you have, right? So you're a salaried person. How many hours are you spending on this? And that's what we need to be doing, is putting a number to that to say, overall, this is our cost. And the cost of having a new employee start in January up till February 15th would have been this much. So are we balancing? Are we losing money? Are we saving money? Like, I feel like we're not really thinking that part out yet. And that's what I was trying to get to, is not saying that we don't need this, but are we shooting ourselves in the foot by saying we intentionally cut this position's start date to February 15th to save money in the budget? But at the end of the day, are we really saving money just because you're salaried, or are we really not putting a cost on it like we should have been? So that was really kind of my point, is almost advocating for you more in a sense to say, like, your time is valuable as well, but we're not doing ourselves any favors if we keep paying consultants and things like that. If we should be hiring somebody who could be handling this position and kind of taking that cost and balancing it out versus just saying, well, we saved money, but now we're actually going to spend money as well. So at the end of the day, it's not balancing, and that's kind of what my point was. So apologies if it came out the other direction, but that just for a little clarity there.
I can try and do that. The other thing I'd like to do is go back to the answer to a previous question. And I think probably the best case scenario, and I'm looking out at Sarah as I say this, with the interview process and getting somebody on board in that position is probably around March 1st at this point. Is that a reasonable guess? It's hard to say. It depends on if they have to give notice and how much notice they have to give. So I do want to make sure I answer that question about how long it might be until we have a person in the position that we've been talking about tonight. But yeah, going back to your question, I can definitely look at that and see what I come up with.
Alderman Weigel?
Okay, I got a series of questions here. So I think you just answered this, Mr. Barg, but us onboarding this position as a hired employee of the city as opposed to being outsourced, we expect that to be done roughly, it's obviously an estimate, but on March 1st, is that correct?
Yeah, I'm just extrapolating from the interviews being conducted in January in the process to get someone, selected. And I'm just guessing maybe they give a month notice to their current employer without knowing how that plays out. And then the plan, going back to what Council President Wagner said earlier, and I realize this is getting old, but was that person will then be at the heart of hiring a city planner and potentially an economic development specialist, subsequent to that.
All right, okay, and then just to reiterate Ms. Thompson's point is that if we were to put this out for RFQ, we're looking at 30 to 60 days before we get that bidding process completed. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think probably 60 days is probably a good guess. You take proposals from people for maybe 3 weeks, hopefully get a good sample of companies that can do this work and, bring it through to you folks. Maybe less than 60 days, but I think 60 is a reasonable guess.
Okay, and if we were to go with a different vendor, if I can use that term correctly here, but would this new vendor, this new person taking over, would he or she come in at full speed, or would it be an onboarding training process?
It depends on whether or not they've had past experience with us. I mean, we've had some dealings in the past with MSA and maybe other companies. They might be familiar somewhat with what we do. Ellers, I'm not sure if they do economic development work. They certainly know us from their financial dealings with the city. The more background somebody has, the more likely they'd be able to step in and work with us. But nobody's going to know us too intimately at this point. Nobody's been that directly involved with us in the world of community and economic development recently.
Right, and I think that kind of culminates and makes my point here is that if we're talking 60 days for this RFQ coming out, that puts us at what, 228.31 already. Then if there is any amount of onboarding time as well, it pushes it out even further. And if we're expecting that hire to be done by 3/1, pushing this out for an RFQ is, to me, it doesn't follow. It's not logical. Now, I understand Mr. Stauber's point, and I agree with it. I just think that the timing of this just so happens to fall in a curious position where us going out for an RFQ doesn't benefit us if the other things that are already in process are going to come to fruition at that point in time in the same thing. So I understand Mr. Stauber's point and what he's going for, but I'm not going to be supporting this.
It is true that, when a new person comes into that position, that they're going to have a lot on their hands right away. They're just even trying to learn their department that they're supervising. And so, I can see the benefit of having a contractor doing economic development work with us for a while into that person's term. Again, I haven't thought any of this out until tonight.
Alderman Spiros?
I think I'm going to kind of just probably repeat a little bit of what both what Alderperson Werman and Alderperson Andrew Reigel said. I think it is about the timing. We're in a critical point right now in our negotiations, I think, with Weinbrenner. And the people who have been spearheading those negotiations have been Steve and Josh Miller. So, we kind of got, they changed their timeline. Weinbrenner did. I don't want to belabor that, but their timeline changed. They moved it up by more than a year. And I do think that trying to go out for RFQ is just a delay. It's a 60-day delay before you get somebody in here. And they may be starting the ground or they may start running from the ground up. They may not know anything about this. And our original concept of having the new position hire their own team, I think, is still a good concept. But I just worry about trying to do all of that now because there's not enough experience. I think when we went to approve the budget, the reason we moved that position out from a January 1 start to a February 15th or whatever it was, I think we all knew that the January 1st wasn't going to happen anyway. Because we weren't that far along in interviews. We weren't that far. I don't even think we had pulled the job off the boards at that point in time. So I think that was a calculated move on our part because we knew we weren't going to get anyone starting until mid-February at the earliest anyway. So I think that we just continue the course at this point in time. And that's how I'll be voting, is to just stay with Josh Miller for right now and let things play out until we get that other position hired in February.
Alderman Stauber?
Specific to timing, we just approved using Cedar Corp for tax incremental District 15. So, to Administrator Barb's concern, that will continue. Weinbrenner has been a project that's been batted around before I came back on the council. And early in the year, I asked for a proposal that we could present to Weinbrenner. Unfortunately, it wasn't captured in the meeting minutes of Economic Development Corporation or the Economic Development meeting, but I had asked for that on June 30th, and I just don't sense that. Well, I'll say it this way. At this point in discussions with Weinbrenner, I'm confident that staff can take it across the goal line with or without Cedar Corp.
Alderman Tompkins?
I think we need to look at the next 6 months because we are thinking that March 1st, we're going to have a staff person, but we will have 2 people in development services that are still vacant positions. We will still need a consultant, I'm pretty sure. I'm wondering if it would be in order to amend this to say that we will approve this contract, but at the same time, go off for RFQ. so that then if, because we're still going to need a consultant. Even if we get a director, we're still going to need a consultant. There's a lot of stuff that has been backed up in our city. I've heard from different groups in the city that they just really can feel the fact that we don't have a development department at the moment. So if we were to approve this contract, but at the same time go out for RFQ for future, I think that would save us from having this exact same discussion in March. Because if we don't hire someone in March, we're having this exact same discussion. So I move to amend this motion to approve this contract while at the same time going out for RFQ. I'm actually going to say approve the contract for the next 60 days.
Will you hit your amend button, please?
Alderman Tompkins makes a motion. Is there a second to that motion? Second by Alderman Giles. Alderman O'Reilly?
I like the idea. It's very concerning about the policy issue that we talked about. At this point, obviously we can't change what's happened in the past. I do think it would definitely cause some concern without that staff on board for the next 2 months, say, or 2 months in 24. So I do like the RFQ coming out to get us in compliance where we're supposed to be, and I will support this.
Any other discussion? Okay, so we're voting yes. Alderman Weigel.
All right, just for clarification, and I'll direct this to Mr. Wolfgram here. It's your interpretation here that this is not us being outside of compliance. Is that correct?
Yeah, I don't look at the policy and say, particularly because Mr. Bargs indicated that even as you sit here now, you may not be even looking at over that $25,000 mark. So that would be one of the triggering points. The other thing is that this is a purchasing policy that's in front of this body. So you're sort of making that decision as to whether or not you're in compliance by what you do right here since the issue's been raised. So I don't find there to be a violation because you're talking about it. You're talking about an RFP. That's the difference being the type of services. So there's a difference between an RFP and an RFQ, and you guys can mess with that if you want, but that's how the policy reads. And it's sort of like different proposals could be given by professional services that may not necessarily be a quote. In any event, I don't see that. I think that the point was raised. It is on point because of the policy. What you do with it does not in any way implicate that you're outside of your policy because you're addressing that here. And the time period that we're talking about based on the comments by Administrator Barg is that we may not even be looking at $25,000, which would be the triggering point.
Okay, and then just to follow up here, this is more for, just make sure I have this understood correctly. With the amendment of approving this contract and then also going out for an RFQ, are we able to go out for an RFQ at this point in time at a future time period? Is that possible?
Yeah, I'll take that. I would think you would be going out and saying that we'd be looking for services effective March 1st and going beyond. And that's what we'd be asking for their best shot with respect to in a proposal.
Awesome. Thank you, guys.
So we have a motion. Yes. Alderman Spiros.
I'm just going to say this last thing and see what anybody thinks about this. The scary part about going out for RFQ is, I believe when we were looking originally for somebody to help us with this, we didn't really get too many bites on that. And our amount right now is locked in that we pay. So if we go out for RFQ, I'm concerned that we still aren't going to have a staff as of March 1st. Because I think Natasha was correct. That's just not going to. It's not going to be in place. We're going to still need people to do this position. And now I'm concerned that they'll be able to significantly raise their rates And that may be the only thing that comes into us. And that's just one little concern that I'm putting out there, because these rates we have now are locked in at this.
Just to clarify, when we signed on with Cedar Corp for economic development services, and when we signed on with SEH for planning related services, we didn't go out for RFQ either time. We really literally just became aware of the fact that we were in need, and that Bryce Hembrook and Josh Miller and those two respective companies, that their firms had services that they could offer on a time and materials basis until we found staff. So if that causes a problem with the procurement policy, so be it. But it came from the thought that we temporarily needed to find somebody to do work that no one else was able to do. And we were very blessed, quite frankly, to find two former employees in those two firms that could help us.
Alderman Wagner?
Yeah, just out of curiosity, did we budget for both a consultant because of beginning January 1st and the 2-month delayed salary of the new assistant city administrator / economic development person? We got to find another way of calling it. No, I much of a mouthful.
As far as the city planner position, I backed that up. If you remember, we had to deal with that $340,000 shortfall from the utilities dividend or pilot payment. Part of what I did was I backed up the start of the assistant city administrator, community development director to February 15th, and the city planner to, I believe, May 15th as a result.
So, but did we only budget for May 15th or just
we budgeted for city planner from, I believe, May 15th through the end of the year, and for that top position from February 15th through the end of the year. That was part of the savings that I put together in terms of trying to balance that.
So that gap, that savings is what you're going to pull this money out of, right? In other words, you budgeted for both places.
That's what I used in part to balance the budget, along with the other things that you trimmed back on November 28th. I cut out 1.5 months of the assistant city administrator salary when it was evident that we weren't going to start somebody on January 1st anyway. And because of thinking it would take 90 days for that person to help us get to a point of hiring a city planner and bringing them on board, I backed that up from April 1st starting date to May 15th starting date.
Yeah, that lowered the amount that we asked for in the budget. But how are you paying for this contract that's going to go on? That's the question.
No, we always budgeted to have a consultant. In fact, I think we budgeted for a consultant for economic development throughout the entire year, not knowing if we would ever do the transition to an economic development specialist staff position. So there's no issue about the dollar amount going forward for a contract like this.
Drop the mic.
What did you say?
So we have the money. Yes, we have the money in the budget.
Yeah.
Alderman Spiros?
Can we have the amended motion read back and also the original motion?
The amended motion would be to approve the contract extension with Cedar Corporation for 60 days while also going out for RFQ for economic development services. The original motion was to go out to bid for professional services related to economic development.
Alderman Weigel?
Okay, I apologize. One last, question here. Ms. Spiros brings up a decent point here. When was the last time these, cost, however you want to call it, the hourly cost, when was the last time that got increased or modified by Cedar Corp?
We've been with Cedar Corp for about a year now, and I don't remember if it was ever, I think it might have been bumped up a few dollars earlier this year, but it's been $130 per hour for the last 3 quarters, I'm pretty sure.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Go ahead.
I definitely didn't want to have to say anything. The part of the thing, and just so you know, that the contract that we did sign does have some provision that there is a set point in the term of that contract where the rate could go up. I think it's probably insignificant, but just since you're raising those issues, you should know, because I don't want you to sign on to this saying, okay, we got them locked in, and then all of a sudden they raise it by $5 because the contract provides that. I can't remember the specific date, but it's like maybe November or something.
No, I think it's actually March 1st. March 1st, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So theoretically, they could, on March 1st, they could increase the rate for that final month of this 3-month contract. But also theoretically, we could say we're done. I mean, at any point in the contract, we can opt out and not pay them for any services. But that is correct. And as I recall now, getting back to your question, Councilmember Rigel, that was the time last year that it was elevated slightly back in the early part of 2023.
So we have a motion on the floor by Alderman Tompkins, a second by Alderman Giles to amend the motion, correct? Any other comments, questions? Seeing none, please vote on the amendment.
Mr. Werman,
Yes.
Mrs. Spiros,
Yes.
Mr. Rigel,
Yes.
Motion passes. Now do we have? Now we need to go back and vote on Alderman Stauber motion, Alderman Giles second, on the original motion.
as amended.
As amended.
Mr. Werman,
Sorry, can I get clarity on that? But we voted on the amendment, and so now
so now you're
we're
voting on the original
motion, but it's
as amended. Correct. So
Okay.
essentially the same
So
motion.
then, yeah, I was going to say, so that's the same. Okay, yes. Thank you.
So Mr. Werman, your vote?
Yes.
Mrs. Spiros,
Yes.
Mr. Rigel,
Yes.
Motion passes with the amendment. Thank you very much, everyone. Item S, request to approve refilling the vacant police officer and record specialist position presented by Jody Gurink, Police Chief. Your folks are come in. Come in, have a seat.
Okay, hopefully this isn't as confusing. All right, there's 2 vacancies in the police department right now. One is a record specialist and one in law enforcement. Both positions are in the 24 budget. The record specialist is ready immediately, and law enforcement, we were going to hold off till May. PFC did approve moving forward with both positions as budgeted. The vacancy currently in the law enforcement side is in the detective bureau, as you might recall. Our plan is to hire a police officer, get them up and running, and then once they're on their own, come back and ask for a promotion from in-house to fill the detective position. So I would request that this body approve me moving forward with the hiring process of both the record specialist and the law enforcement officer.
We have a motion by Alderman Varsho, second by Alderman Fire. Any discussion? Seeing none, please vote.
Mr. Werman,
Yes.
Mrs. Spiros,
Yes.
Mr. Rigel,
Yes.
Motion passes. Thank you. Item T, request to approve refiling vacant GIS coordinator position presented by Tom Turchi, Director of Public Works.
Good evening. At the last council meeting, there were some concerns brought forth about the replacement hiring of the GIS position within the engineering division. The first question was, could this position be combined with the position at Marshfield Utilities? I fully understand the thoughts behind this combining of positions, but the amount of data layers that are managed by the city that the utilities GIS position would not be capable of managing both locations. I recently spoke to Nick from Marshfield Electric, and he reaffirmed that their personnel would not have the capabilities to manage both Marshfield Utilities projects as well as City of Marshfield projects. In comparison, it is estimated that the City of Marshfield has approximately 15 to 20 times more data layers than the utility. This position is critical to serving the needs of the existing GIS applications. The focus on any GIS is to integrate departments and data. David has taken the city's GIS capabilities beyond simply mapping the city's facilities to creating and deploying custom applications tailored to other city departments and GIS needs. These apps have streamlined many departments' operations and provided a significant time savings in several departments, which translates into cost savings. In 2019, due to the number of projects and staffing available in GIS, a proposal was brought forth to create a GIS specialist position to assist with collecting and keeping data in GIS up to date, which would allow more time for the coordinator to develop apps and do more analysis, go far beyond basic mapping to realize the full potential of GIS. Due to the budget parameters we have had over the past several years, staff have not been willing to bring this position forward into the municipal budget. GIS is a powerful tool that in so many of our day-to-day operations that I can't imagine operating without this information in public works and in engineering. So that I asked the other city departments to assist me with their uses in GIS and in their departments and divisions, which I have enclosed copies of their emails for your information. There was a question on other entities other than the city of Marshfield who utilize GIS, such as local realtors, developers, Mackey, Visit Marshfield, Marshfield School District, etc. Occasionally request simple mapping to be involved provided by the GIS position. These are typical basic tasks that don't involve a lot of time. We estimated less than 3% of the position's overall time in any given year. We do have means of collecting a fee for such services as outlined in the city's fee schedule. This is a collaboration with outside entities is typically done to support economic development and or public safety. An example of planning and mapping and traffic control, parking and vendor spaces at the Maple Fall Fest, along with other events. This improves public safety, enhances the user experience during these events. In addition, the public at large are able to use the city's public GIS mapping application to gather information related to the community from the comfort of their home or office. This map includes parcel and owner information, detailed aerial photography, garbage and recycling schedules, zoning information, etc. These are designed to be self-serve. Another important function of GIS is the ability for the public citizen complaint forms and geo-reporting, which adds an additional way for citizens to interact with the various services provided by the city. Since I believe this is such an important position in the city, I have requested David Bueller to provide a presentation of some of the many uses of GIS and the information. But before he begins, I would like to say thank you for a wonderful 11 years of experience with us, and I wish him the best with his new position as he moves forward to his next career step. So I'll let David speak.
Thank you, everyone. All right, so GIS in Marshfield. We're going to go over a little bit of history, what's public-facing, internal uses, and where we're going. So we started GIS about 20 years ago or so with a single layer, collection of parcels, and a lot of paper maps. And from then, it grew to sanitary, storm, and some GPS collection, and it just blossomed from there. Technology has really caught up in the last 7 years and has allowed us to do a lot more with a lot less. High accuracy GPSs are now able to pair with any device. That's allowed our field staff to collect things in the field accurately and quickly without the need to bring any device back in the office or reference anything from the office because they can get it right out in the field. We have way better web mapping technologies than we've had, faster computers and servers, and this has allowed us to break through the silos of information from other departments and integrate them for various uses. So currently we have about 39 data sets. That doesn't include every layer inside of those data sets in our master database, and countless other niche data sets that are used kind of as one-off things that are state statutes or reports or maps or things like that. We have several public-facing apps. We've streamlined countless workflows using GIS, and others tap into GIS as needed. We have about 15 desktop users. We got 39 enhanced web users and 6 just viewers. along with everybody that can access to public information. So here's kind of an overview of most of the public-facing things, and you can find these on our website. I'll highlight some of those in a moment. But these are the self-service that the public can use, and even general staff rely on them a lot. So you might remember things like No Mow May that happened this past year. That was run through our GIS program. Our bicycle pedestrian plan collected information from public comments. Where Do I Vote gets hit a lot during every election. I think Jess relies on it a lot, as well as normal citizens and the poll workers. So you also see notices going out for detours and road closures and all of that stuff. That all comes through GIS. So a lot of other information gets pulled from and through GIS. This is just a fraction of the internal uses. So we got several hub sites, which are basically condensations of all of their departmental needs in one place that they can one-stop shop. So we got like a hub site for street division that pulls in all their needs. MCOP, or Marshfield Common Operating Picture, used by police and fire. An emergency operations center. We got our forestry application. I believe you got a presentation on that a few weeks ago. Our plumbing inspector goes out and collects all of the private side infrastructure that connects to our networks, so we know what's actually connected to our network with high accuracy GPS, which also cuts down on residential cost or property owners' costs as they replace those laterals or those water services. It's really come in handy where they've had to redig things, and it's right there on the money that Brian can locate. We have mowing complaints and sidewalk complaints that come through all the time. We've streamlined that process using GIS from about 26 steps back in the day down to about 10, and most of it's done out in the field without ever needing to set foot in the office. We do countless other things through that. You've heard about citizen complaints. We've revised that, and it's a way for us to interact and automatically route complaints to the right people without ever having to see somebody in person or make that phone call. And we know where it is and where we can respond to. Believe it or not, we use GIS in collective bargaining. Even HR uses it, or at least the people that they're bargaining with, to do residential analysis. So if you're outside of that boundary, are we going to allow that candidate to live outside of that 30-mile radius or whatever you negotiate? So there's a quick app for that. We use it extensively in planning, comprehensive plans, park plans, the emergency services radio tower study that was done a few years back, ISO qualifications for the fire department, sign inventories that are state statutely regulated, economic development assistance, utility locates, and the list just goes on. And one of the most recent ones we deployed was Whistler. So that's where we do our road ratings, which ties into how the state allocates our funds to us. So we've got that down to about 40 hours with roughly 2 people instead of weeks and teams doing it the old way. So in the future, more automation is obviously needed. We're constantly building on that, and siloing more information and information sharing between departments, because everybody looks at the same stuff and maybe has a different use for it. We're integrating with more systems like Evolve permitting software, these wastewater systems and things like that. And we're collecting more and more data that needs to be analyzed and reported upon so that we can make informed decisions. And GIS is basically the hub inside of the city that kind of goes under the rug and radar a lot, but it's used every day for things I don't even know. Every department inside the city touches it in some way, shape, or form. And really, GIS is about force multiplying and supporting everyone else. So government, business, organizations in the community, residents, and things like that. So I'd like to highlight some of the apps that we have. Hopefully I'm still sharing. So we have our public viewer. That's anybody can access. It provides the information that Tom talked about. We got the Where Do I Vote, which is important for elections and knowing where your constituents vote and how they can reach you and things like that. You've seen the No Mow May. where they can make the pledge. So we can also track things on the back end if there's any other major complaints or how many people are on board with that idea, so we can get that public input. This is the citizen complaint form. It's pretty straightforward. You can log it and everybody kind of knows where it goes. And then it gets to the department and they can handle it however they want. This is that common operating picture that I talked about, one of them. So we have a common operating picture. You may or may not have seen it if you have ever come to the EOC. We started doing a map out of all the structures inside of Marshfield that are commercial, industrial, and public. And what that allows for is planning, both on the back end for police and fire, but also in an emergency, we know what resources are where and what type of real estate we're looking at. We use it in missing persons, cases, ATV routes, and heavy traffic routes, things like that. And we also log into we tap into our software vendor for emergency assistance if it ever comes to it, where they would uncap it. And so my goal was to, if I'm not ever able to come in for that event, anybody can then access this resource to do that type of stuff. So here's some countless ones for the street division. You see the forestry work order complaints. So after that ice storm, we spun up something that they could track all the complaints that were coming in and prioritize workloads. Snow removal, plow damage, crack filling, things like that, mowing, bids, things like that. So there's that app for that we negotiate with for residency requirements. And then here's kind of the state of our roads as of 2023 that we went and just rated. So that's kind of one of the apps, kind of a high-level overview of some of the things that GIS provide.
Thank you very much, David. Okay. Okay.
Was there a motion?
We have a motion by Stauber and a second by Alderman Varsho. I apologize, I don't have it on my screen, so I have to sneak over and look.
Okay. Got a question when I'm recognized. Ready to go?
Yes, Alderman Tompkins.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. David, did you build this?
Which part?
I don't know. It's amazing.
Yes, over the course of my 11 and change years here.
It's absolutely incredible. I remember calling once because a young tree had been run over in a park in my district, and the forester could, by me describing where it was, he could look exactly and pinpoint the tree that had been killed. But yeah, this is incredible. I have one question. So on the Utilities Commission, the fire department did request that they change the color of the hydrants so that they would know the volume of water for the water mains, because that's sometimes a problem if all the hydrants are orange. So can that be looked up on the GIS where they could quickly determine the volume of water that would come from a hydrant?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Alderman Stauber.
Thank you for the presentation. It's always good to ask how we deliver services and why we deliver services. Not only when a position becomes vacant, but that's an ideal time to ask. I think we should be prepared to have the discussion. Meanwhile, we've got residents that stand at that same lectern and ask us why we're so staff heavy, and that's just something we have to try to explain. After listening to you, I think we need maybe 3 guys like you, right? Yeah, exactly. So I was on board when we started GIS, and I know what it took, a lot of heavy lifting, and I appreciate everything you've done to enhance it at this point. Some questions. My initial question was bigger than Public Works, but I appreciate Mr. Turchi taking a swing at it. So the population of GIS coordinators in Marshfield is probably 2. You and maybe somebody at the utility, I'm guessing.
Correct.
Okay. So, and I don't know how often you guys talk, but so based on what Mr. Turchi said earlier, about 3% of your work, and before the meeting I was trying to put in buckets of essential, non-essential, but about using his reference, 3% is for non-city of Marshfield related activities. So it could be supporting the school district, could be supporting private sector realtors, for example. My question was going to be, knowing what you know about the utility demand for GIS coordinator, is it even in the realm of possibility that workload could be picked up by the city of Marshfield GIS coordinator?
No, not without help.
Okay.
I have a backlog of not only entries of the base level stuff all the way up to I want a new workflow and new integration.
Okay, thank you for that. So I talked about shared services, prioritization of requests. I would just hope that there's some, I can see the big demand for what you do. I would hope that we've got some kind of method of prioritizing those requests so that something mission critical doesn't take a backseat to something that would be nice to have. The fee schedule, maybe if appropriate, that might be something we could talk about during a Board of Public Works meeting. I don't understand why we'd have fees charged against the project, but then support private sector realtors, for example, and not charge them. So go ahead. Yeah.
So to answer that, we do offer by open records requests. Basically, there's certain layers that we offer up for free, parcel data and things like that, that is easily accessible and quick, so quick it's not even worth filling out a requisition form. It takes a matter of click, and it's same.
Okay. All right, that's good perspective. And then, so you just answered self-service. Not to get too crazy on you here, but you seem to have a good read on your profession. And I'm just, you touched on a little bit, but projecting out ahead, you're moving on. I've seen the past and I see where we are now. What does GIS look like down the road? And I'm thinking, AI is staring everyone in the face, and any projections, either short, medium, or longer term, and that might include additional staffing.
So in terms of AI, it is already here. It's already accessible by us. We just don't have the data sets that we need it for. So a lot of GIS uses is pulling out features off of aerial type of photography. So there might be in the future some version of that refines itself to our needs. We look at that every time we do a aerial acquisition. So every 5 years. So the next one will be 2025 is when we're looking at doing that project again. We did a product called Planometrics, which is features extracted off of that flight. So with varying degrees of success, other communities have used the AI generated, for lack of a better term, and they don't get the results that they would like the curb lines and brake lines that our engineers need to do their jobs appropriately to best plan for the city. In terms of future, it's going to be a lot more data and a lot more collection methods. So LiDAR, drones, tablets integration, more silos unfurled, better analysis of your data, heat maps can be generated on demand, things like that. So it's going to be a lot more self-service, but somebody needs to helm the ship on how to implement those the best way possible.
So translate that to additional staff requirements. Yeah.
So there's what I do and then what I need help doing. So the monster doesn't feed itself. It needs somebody to put in some of the data. So new catch basins and things that are installed in the field. Somebody goes and collects those. Somebody then needs to qualify. I typically, at least once a year, go through and add those to our system, verify all the information is correct, make sure it's all hooked up to the network so that if in an event of a spill, you can run a backward trace and see where that spill and what it might affect. So in terms of staffing, there definitely needs to be not only my position, but somebody to aid in the more daily operations of the data requests, the quick map turnarounds. So you had mentioned prioritization of work. So I'm dealing with one right now where there's a licensing issue. Well, that means something else isn't getting done, like the maps for an economic development or something like that, because that impacts a lot more people. So it's that person that may do the continuity type stuff, the little requests, like a specialist or a technician that is needed to help filter those small requests that often get backburnered for weeks, if not maybe months.
Okay, and I'll close by thanking you again for the presentation. Thanks for your 11 years of service, and wish you all the best in the future. And it's okay to come back too sometimes.
Sure.
Or prove that. So thank you.
Thank you.
Alderman Spiros and then Alderman Weigel, did you want to make a comment?
I did not know.
Okay, wait, okay. Alderman Spiros first, and then I saw Andrew's hand up. Did you want to also make a comment? Because Alderman Spiros is first. Okay, thank you. Just want to clarify. Okay, go ahead, Rebecca.
Okay, thanks. Getting around to the thing on the agenda, whether we need this position or not, I just want to make a couple of comments to the people who don't see the full packet that came out. So that's a lot of citizens. They only really see the council agenda. The sheer number of emails that were provided from the staff indicating how they use the GIS services, there was a lot. And I want to bring to the attention one in particular, and this is because this happened a few years back. I don't even know if it was 2 or 3 years. I'm not even 100% sure when it was, but this is the time that I had the opportunity to work with David, is when we did redistricting the last time. And redistricting is coming up in January. And while that might sound like an easy task, it isn't, and it's a very time-sensitive task, or at least it was the last time. You have to wait for the county to do their borders of their districts, and then the city has just a small amount of time to get their districts done to their aldermanic districts, because we do like our aldermanic districts to match those of the county and you not be split, with who represents your citizens in your district at the state level. And I will tell you, we were sort of looking at the data and, just our brains were kind of swimming. And David came in like a 5-minute process. I'm sure it took him way longer because he worked behind the scenes, but he came into us, and in a 5-minute process, he had all of our problems solved. He had, the proper way to draw the district lines. And I'm talking about the aldermanic districts now, to match what the county had put forward. And what seems like a very ridiculously overwhelming project became very simplified with his knowledge and his abilities. And I see we're going to be going through that again here early in the first part of this year. So I think this position is critical. And I will echo what other people have said. David, thank you for all of the years that you have put into the city of Marshfield.
Thank you.
Yeah, just one quick comment. I know this came up at the last meeting and it came up again tonight, but just to clarify, we talk about that small percentage of time that you might be doing something on behalf of other agencies, Mackey or whoever. It generally has a city benefit as well. In other words, when we're working with Mackey, it might be because the business development director helps us market sites in the business and industrial parks with the certified survey or the certified sites process. So it's generally tied to us in some way.
Yeah, I would say about 98% of those requests come from an internal source on behalf of other organization.
Right. So it's not outside of us. It's part of what we do. Thank you.
And yes, once again, thank you for your presentation and for your years of service, David.
Thanks, David.
It's been a pleasure working with you. So we do have a motion on the floor by Alderman Stauber, second by Alderman Varsho. Any other comments, questions? Seeing none, please vote.
Mr. Werman?
Yes.
Mrs. Spiros?
Yes.
Mr. Reigel?
Yes.
Motion passes. Thank you. Item U, appointment of Mike Weigel, 714 North Cedar Avenue, to the Historic Preservation Commission to complete a vacant term ending April 2025. Motion by Alderman Varsho, second by Alderman Tompkins. Any discussion? Seeing none, please vote.
Mr. Werman?
Yes.
Mrs. Spiros?
Yes.
Mr. Reigel?
Yes.
Motion passes, and thank you again, Mike, for stepping up. Item V, suggested items for further agendas. Seeing none, We'll move to item W, adjourn to closed session under Wisconsin Statute Chapter 19.851C, considering employment, promotion, compensation, or performance evaluation data of any public employee over which the governmental body has jurisdiction or exercises responsibility. Collective bargaining agreement with the Marshfield Police Bargaining Unit. We have a motion by Alderman O'Reilly, second by Alderman Varsho. All those in favor, please vote.
Mr. Werman?
Yes.
Mrs. Spiros?
Yes.
Mr. Rigel?
Yes.
We are in closed session. We'll have a 5-minute